This podcast is brought to you by Infinite Resources, a local staffing agency connecting diverse job candidates in central Iowa companies.
Amplified.
Welcome to Shed Talk.
Unveiling the conversations that thrive behind the shed, where authenticity meets unfiltered stories.
I'm Javier Tool, certified personal trainer and owner of Tool Shed Training and trainer at The Shed.
And I'm Tammy Humple, professional educator and leadership coach. Also, welcome back to those of you who've been listening. It's been so great to hear from you and to get your perspectives on the topics we've been talking about. Special thanks to our friends here at Amplified for providing the space and opportunity to talk with you today. So this is our third episode in our Return to Happiness series. And the first two episodes that we recorded, we talked about wealth. What does wealth mean to you? And the second one was recognition. And what does that mean to you? So today we're talking about success. Kind of the same thing. How do we define it? How does it motivate us? How does it impact our sense of worth? And how does it influence our decisions? So I found a quote hanging out on tinybuddha.com, and it's by Emmy Ray, and this is what it says. What if our markers of success were how well you slept at night, how many books you read, how easily you laughed, how much time you spent storytelling, feeling warm in the arms and homes of people you adore?
I like that, but I don't sleep a lot, so that wouldn't be a good one, but I do tell a lot of stories.
You do tell a lot of stories.
And this one's going to be, I think, exciting for us because we've been talking a lot about this the last week and a half, and we took a little break, I think, to get the juices flowing and to see where we're going. We're going through quite a bit at work and with the holidays. A lot of holiday stuff.
A lot of holiday stuff. A lot of work changes suddenly kind of after the first of the year,
So I'm not going to lie, I'm extremely nervous for episode 3, and I don't even know why. I think it's because there's so much papers here, and there's so much that we need to talk about, but let's just get right into it. So this week, we have been talking about personal success and professional success. And I think when we have conversations with people, even myself, if you ask me what professional success is, man, that one's pretty easy for me. And it has been, I think, the last few years. My professional success is being able to give opportunities to other people, like in my gym, to train, to be able to stay open, to keep the doors open at the gym, to see my caseload grow, to see the success through my clients. So that piece has been kind of easier for me. And I think when I had conversations with people, I think even you, we've seen that that's been an easier benchmark to talk about.
Well, and I think that's just it. Those markers are pretty tangible, right? They're pretty socially accepted. They're familiar to us, and so that's not so hard to think about. And measuring ourselves against those things is easier. But then when we think about the markers that maybe we should use, those personal markers, I think that gets trickier because they're what are most important to us. And that's what we've been talking about in this series is how do we get back to the core of what makes us who we want to be.
Yeah. So when we talk about the personal success too, and I say professional or personal because I think if you don't have that personal side of what you think success is, I think it's hard not to get bought in so hard into the professional side. And you and I talked about the status of your evaluation. And we really got in depth about this. So evaluations usually consist of 5 to 2 to 1. So I was a supervisor for a long time, and you would do an evaluation to somebody, and you would say, "Gosh, you're just hitting these benchmarks, 5, 5, 5."
Yeah, and it's on that scale of 1 to 5, right? So thinking about measuring up on that scale,
right? And then all of a sudden you got to drop the 3, and they're like, "Well, what do you mean I got a 3?" Well, unless you're Superman. That 3 is probably going to affect what you think your success is. And a lot of times I don't think people understand you can't always get all 5s. I'm not sure why. But in the world that we lived in, and I think sometimes we're going away from those statuses and those evaluations, but if you get a 3, what does that do to you? And how does that really dictate how you feel about your success?
And then it feels like it feels personal, right? Even though it's probably based on some kind of rubric or scale that's about performance and not who you are as an employee or who you are as a person, it suddenly feels personal.
Right.
And so now we've flipped the script on that, and we've taken our social success and made it a personal success or not success, and then we determine our worth based on that.
Right.
And I think we get that wrong. But when we looked at the Gallup data that we were looking at, it was stacked up that same way, right? The difference between how we measure our success based on society's perceptions versus our personal perceptions.
Right, because society perception was status. I think it was something like almost 50%, like we think status is important. So when we think about those evaluations, I always wonder, like, what happens if you were able to give someone all fives? Like, and say, so let's get communication. On this one, you get a 5, but it's kind of a lower 5. Do you think that person would be like, oh, sweet, I still got a 5. I could work a little bit harder. But we're almost a society where we live in a room, like the 5 to 2 status. Like, we were just out in the car, and my son made the dean's list, but I didn't believe that he made the dean's list till I actually saw it, and I saw it. So the first thing I send a message to him that says, congratulations on the dean's list. I finally saw it, so I know you made it. And then my next thing was, keep going.
And what's the next thing you ask? I wonder what he got. What was the actual grade point, right? And so it's still, those numbers still mattered.
Right. And then you sparked some interest that I needed to send him a message to say, you're still a 5, no matter what in my book.
Because you're my kid and you're a 5.
Yeah. So I truly believe that if you don't have your own personal success story, like, we can be driven to have so much, I guess, influence by our work and by a status of what society is. And especially nowadays with, like, social media. I mean, you see all these great lives and you see all these great things. And it's like, if I'm not doing that well at my job, or I don't think I'm doing that well in my career, and I see all these other people, does that affect you?
I think it's interesting that when we started to prepare for this third episode on this podcast, we were talking about how we felt like the definition of success has changed from when we were growing up to now. And then we were finding, like, the Gallup data and Forbes and there's a LinkedIn definition that talks about how success and the perception of success and the measure of success is actually changing.
Right.
So I thought that was interesting, because for us at first it was just a feeling, but Forbes even says, in a stable world, success depended on building expertise, right? Being the one who knew the stuff. That made you successful, and it made you better, and it gave you status. In a changing world, they say, it hinges on evolving expertise. Potential is no longer defined by ability. It's a function of agility.
Right.
So you don't have to be the one that knows everything, but you have to know when to make the right moves, when it makes sense to change, to take a risk.
That stumped me, because all of a sudden I'm thinking about, gosh, do I make any agility moves? Am I?
I think you make a lot of agility moves. Think about your own success that you talked about when we started, right? How your business has changed, how you're thinking about what the business should be has changed.
Right.
So I believe you have been agile in your thinking. We talk about this all the time. What's the next move for my business?
But I think there's so much truth. It's like, does your business grow and develop? Like, are you able to keep up with the times? Because if you don't, it goes away. And I honestly think and this is just my personal aspect, and this is something I think, one of my clients, Sean, said, if you're just driven by money, you're never going to be fulfilled. So what is it that's driving your business? What is it that's driving you? And I think for probably the last 10 years, mine has been people. We talked about this, the wealth thing a couple of weeks ago, where wealth it's nice to hit those things because then it gives you the opportunity to help more people. But I think at the end of the day, success isn't about money. Personally for me, it's about making those agility moves to keep the gym open, to redefine myself, to help empower those around me.
And maybe if it was about money, because maybe it was, or maybe it is for some people, and we've talked about that too, sometimes it has to be, but maybe the agile move is using that money to make a difference for others, be a multiplier, multiply that influence, that impact the gifts that we have as people and use the wealth that might be monetary, financial, to do that.
And I think I want to, this podcast has really changed me significantly in how I think in my life. And I don't want to be the dad anymore who looks at my kid and says, you're not getting all fives, you're getting a lot of threes. I don't want to be that dad. I want to be the dad who says, you're getting all fives. And we're going to try to keep those all fives. And we're going to work on every piece of those things. And I'm going to give you as much positive reinforcement, even in the negative things that we're going through. Because I grew up in an era where there was a lot of threes. You throw a couple good touchdown passes, but you miss a couple throws. But that was the era that we grew up. In order to push somebody, I think sometimes we live in a society where in order to think that we're going to get someone better, we need to make sure we put a measurable tool that puts them at a lower rate than what maybe they're actually at.
Think about the goals that we set, right?
Yep.
We typically want to make sure that they're measurable. And by measurable, we mean let's assign a number to them or a scale to them or a quantity to them. We don't think about, what we talked about at the beginning. What if those markers, that scale was actually how strong our relationships were or how much quality time we spent with our kids or our significant other. And that, I think that changes things for us. We also, though, talked about how that can be different and seems different based on the culture that you grew up in. So not just how you were raised, but the expectation of the folks in your community.
Right. I'll use my brother as an example. I don't think he'll care. Like, my brother's more family-oriented than I am. My brother's more like, his success is going to be like, how much more time does he get to spend with his kiddos? So they may live in the house longer than what my expectation for my son is. In my house, it's my son has, you're going to go to school, you're going to go to college, you're going to be successful, and I might see you sometime when you come visit. But my brother's the opposite of that. My brother's like, you can stay here and I'm going to help you. And if you need to live with me as long as you can, and that's okay. But for a while in my mindset, I was like, what are you doing? I was like, you're setting such a low expectation, but maybe he's setting an even higher expectation than I am because he's putting in another value that sometimes I miss out on by sending Royce out to go and conquer the world. Maybe Royce should be conquering the world with me and not on his own.
Right. And is fostering that independence the right thing? It's what you and I see as success. Yep, I did that on my own, and I can be better if I believe in myself. But are we really better? I also believe we're better together. So in that, I'm a little bit, I'm conflicted in my own thinking, right? That I want my kids to be able to do things on their own and believe in themselves, to know that they can. They don't have to rely on anyone. But I also want them to understand that we're better together and that it's not necessarily relying on someone, but being there for someone, walking the walk together.
Right. My family, a big part of my family is from Texas. And I would say when we went down to visit them for my grandpa's funeral, it was one of the most, I think, eye-opening things for me. I'm on my cell phone a tremendous amount, and I'm checking emails, and this is how I'm successful. People are messaging me. I need to keep up on it. But when I was at their house, like, their kids had their cell phones. They were playing games because there was so much family orientation. Like, it was important for them to talk to each other and not always just be on checking their messages. So their status and their success was probably a lot different than mine. Like, my success is I got to respond to everything as fast as I possibly can, run a great business, but I was missing out on so many things. And I think culture-based success is really a big thing. Like, do we open our eyes and are we open to anybody else's success? Like, I love my brother, and what him and my niece showed me the time she lived with me was, Javier, not your success isn't everyone's success. Like, you need to start seeing that there's so much more to different pieces of the culture, different siblings, different areas of your life that are going to be more successful than just your work.
And do we have an imbalance in how we not necessarily measure, but the emphasis that we put on one type of success over another. So I wonder if going to college, getting a good job, making a certain amount of money, living in a certain kind of a house, if we put more weight on that than the relationship type of success. And I wonder, actually, as a society in the United States, if we aren't misguided in that. We're emphasizing one type of success over the other instead of finding a way to appreciate all of it.
So I'm going to use a personal example. We had an outstanding year this year. And so I was talking to Kyle, one of my clients, and he goes, so what is your goals for this year? Like, and you know, you had a successful year last year. And I was like, I'm not for sure. He goes, well, how about you manage your time better? And it was one of the things I heard from a lot of my clients. Sean, one of my clients, was the biggest success he's ever had in his life is learning how to manage his time through his business. And I was like, I'm going to manage my time this year. This is what I'm going to do. And then Squarespace, our Square, the little square that you swipe your card, right, sends me a notice and says, you're in the top 3% of your small businesses in the United States. And I lost my freaking mind. I was like, 3%. I was like, why am I not number one? And all of a sudden, I'm like looking at my schedule, and I'm like, I'm going to fill in all these slots from somebody I don't even know, from a material thing, from most likely they probably sent to all the other small businesses because they don't want you like taking your time to walk away and not swipe your card so they can get their fee money to motivate me to make sure I make money for them and myself. And all of a sudden, I was like, well, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? You just told yourself this year you're going to be successful by managing your time, spending it with people that you want to spend it with. And I'm over there looking at my calendar and be like, I want to be number one.
Right. Because that's so attractive. And I think case in point, we lose our way because the recognition that we get from being really good at something in our society is number one, number two, number three. Those are all pretty good. If you get below that, then not so much. Same as like on that scale of 1 to 5. If 5 is good, then I don't want to be anywhere near a 3 because that's mediocre and that's attractive. And we lose sight of all the things that we've talked about so far that are most important to us and how we define what's most important. How do we stay close to what mattered most, what started us out, what keeps us going, and how do we avoid the trap?
Right. So I don't want to use you for an example this week, but can I?
Go ahead.
So you had a rough, I think it was a Monday or Tuesday, and I might have said to you, probably too fresh in the day, to recognize all the people that you helped through the job that you're going through some things in. And I'm pretty sure you looked at me with the most evil eyes and scorned me for a second. But it made me think about what you and I had talked about and what the sheet of paper tells us was that sometimes we miss all the wonderful things that we have accomplished in our lives and in our professional world because somebody else can dictate what we can and cannot do and honestly take something away from us so quickly.
And when we let those markers of success be what someone else determines, and sometimes we don't have a choice in a job. Yep. If evaluation is part of your job, and it is of every job I've ever been a part of, that matters. But I think what happens is we become our job. Our identity now is so closely tied to our job and our performance that we forget who we are as a person, and that enters into who we are as a job. Yep. And that gives you a different take on what success really is.
And I think this is where we switch gears. And I think professionally it's very easy for us to dictate success, valuations, finances, growth. No growth, those kinds of things. But personal is tough. But I truly believe that if you have a lack of personal insight of your own success, it can really destroy you. Mm-hmm. And things in your job can take things away, things someone else says, or what you think other people think your success is, can really take a piece of you and just kind of make you not feel good about yourself.
Oh, I think it steals your self-worth. And I think if we're grounded in who we believe we want to be, first and foremost, then our work should be about that. We shouldn't be about our work. But when you take a hit, like I did, since the first of the year, I work for an agency that potentially might not be for sure as it is now. So there's change coming, and I may or may not have a job. A lot of people deal with that. But it doesn't change, and I let it change for a while, how I viewed my success in my career and the difference that I've made, because I wasn't making the decision about the next move. And so that felt like someone was taking everything that I had worked for away from me. And so because my identity is so closely tied to the work that I do, instead of thinking about the career and the changes that I've made and the people and the kids and the teachers that I've impacted, I started to think about the job, the title, the work as it stands now and not in its entirety. And if I hadn't been grounded in knowing that no matter what the job was, the difference that I want to make is what matters, and I can take that anywhere. If I hadn't remained grounded in that, I would have lost myself. I did lose myself a little bit and probably will again, right? Because that's what happens with change. It just happens. The good news is there are some things that we can do that if we let them become habits, they ground us.
Right.
And we can get back to that faster.
So all these things happen this week, and I always smile because I think when I get ready to do these podcasts, I open my eyes a little bit, open my ears a little bit more, and you can hear things. And on my way back, I always I listen to Father Mike every morning, and he was just talking about how this young man was born into a Catholic family. They weren't really practicing Catholics, but most practicing Catholics will still baptize your child. So I think his dad was a newspaper person in Italy, and he wasn't big on religion. Mom wasn't really big on religion either, but he found a way to get to church. And as he got to church, he got a better relationship with God. And as he got that better relationship with God, he started helping feed the homeless, give them medications, and he did it on a weekly basis. I think it started happening on Fridays, and then he got ill. And when he got ill, it paralyzed him. And after he got paralyzed, it pretty much killed him. And some of the last things he did before he passed away was he wrote out the medication sheets for these people. And it hit me in a weird kind of way at 2:30 in the morning or 2:10 in the morning. And I started realizing, man, I'm thinking about this square that drives me. And I think about what you were going through. And is there another piece of success that's higher than us, that's so big that it's more than just us? And is it bigger than any material thing? Is it a spiritual relationship with something other than, any spiritual relationship that you have that's bigger than you? And I started thinking about that. I was like, maybe I should reevaluate a little bit. Maybe I need to really see what success really is, and am I missing a piece of it?
One of the interview questions that I had, and it's been years ago now, but it's still, I still think it's probably the best question I've ever been asked, is what would you want the sign above your door to say when you're gone? And I couldn't think about what I might want that to say right away, because of the very thing you're talking about. It was bigger than me. It's always been bigger than me. Whatever that is, whatever that higher power is, that bigger reason that draws us as humans to do better work, to be better for people, to be a multiplier, like what you're working on right now. You're working on being a better trainer, but not just being a better trainer, making sure that the trainers that work with you are better too.
Right. So it's interesting because I have a client and her mom, and I'm only on my cell phone for that reason. Her mom's 90-some years old. She sees her every week, and we talk about her every week. And I was like, do me a huge favor. I was like the age difference between all of us. And I was like, can you just ask your mom what her success is? And I was like, you're going to see her before we do the podcast today. And she sent me this message: mom's success, relying on a power higher than myself. And I had a smile because, I mean, that's exactly what we were talking about. That's exactly what Father Mike was telling a story about. And it made me reach into something even more. I started thinking about one thing. What is our own personal success? But not even our own personal success. What do we understand about someone else's personal success? And I asked a lot of people with spouses this week, do you know what your spouse's personal success is? And do they know yours? And there was a lot of silence in both of those questions. And I can honestly say a lot of people were like, I don't know if I've ever asked that question, and I don't know if I really know that answer myself.
And wouldn't it be interesting to dig into that a little bit? Because what I would say my husband's most successful moments might not be the ones that he identifies for himself. Right? And we're right back to what I might initially think of are some of those societal markers, and what he probably would say are not so much about that, not about his position or his success in his job or the amount of money and raises that he's gotten, all those things we've talked about before today, the wealth and the recognition, but I don't know that for sure, and I shouldn't answer that for him, and I think we do that for each other, and that feeds right back into that, allowing someone else to determine our markers of success.
So that question was asked to me, and for the first time, I really sat down and thought about it, and it makes me tear up. Like when someone asked me, is it your gym that's your personal success? And I was like, not at all. I was like, that's not my personal success at all. My personal success was learning how to care about something more than myself. And that's when Royce came to me. And it just floors me when I think about it, because it's not even being a good dad. It's just the whole point that I was able to love something so unconditionally for the first time in my entire life. And it changed my perception of how I treated other people. And it's helped me grow with them, and it's helped me grow with other people, and how my relationships are with them. And I don't know if that would ever happen. Mm-hmm. And I would like to think the day that I die, that someone's not up there just rambling bull bleep and said, this is what Javier truly thought his success was. And that's what I challenge a lot of people, especially to someone who's significant to you, your mom, mm-hmm. Your grandmother before they pass, or your spouse. Do you actually know what is going to come out of their mouth, or what came out of their mouth to tell you what true success was in their life?
And I'm not sure you would even say that your professional success is the success of your gym. I think, and here I am talking for you, but you tell me if I'm right, I think you would say the difference you make for the people on a daily basis. It's not about the success of the gym, or that it's been around for 12 years, or that it's getting bigger, or that it's changing and evolving.
Yeah, you're right.
It's about the people.
Yeah, and that's like when you think about, it's not about the financial stuff. Is that, we talked about that this week. It keeps the doors open to be able to help as many people, but the people that come through and watching them change has been amazing. And I think, let me ask you a question. What is your personal success?
Mm. And I still have to think about it, right? And that actually bothers me a little bit, that I just can't let that flow off of the tip of my tongue, because really making a difference for people, it's my personal goals, my personal mantra. If I can leave people better than they were for having known me, that's my personal ambition. And I actually think I've done that for some people, not for everybody that I've met, but my greatest success is changing people's perspective, causing them to pause and leaving them in a way that they feel better about themselves, not that I think they're better for having known me or worked with me or worked alongside me, but that they believe they're better because of something that I've done or said or believed about them and encouraged.
So if this show today is successful, right, that means, Abraham, when we talk to you, you should be able to look at us and tell us what your personal success is. Okay? But I have to smile because, we're sitting here talking about this stuff, and I talk to all my clients about it. And John he's a good client of mine. I run a lot of things beside him. And I just got done telling him the Father Mike story. And then I'm talking about this card and I'm talking about all these things. And he looks at me and he goes, hey, maybe if you just stop talking and thinking about all these successful things or whatever you're talking about and just actually worked on being successful, you just be successful.
Right. So there's that black and white, right? And people think differently. You and I are a lot about connecting with people, making people better, multiplying our presence and our worth and bringing people along. And not everybody's like that. So then what?
Right.
What do you do with that?
You know, and I have to, I was like, I just look at John and I smile because he's always just put me on track. But I was like, touche. Like, but, you know, I think our challenges from this show today, as we get ready to wrap this up, is take the time, even if you're tired after work, to give yourself a high five for your success. No matter what you get on an evaluation, think highly of yourself and know that you're doing a good job and always work to get better. And then take the time to really ask your loved ones. So if anything ever happens, number one, you gave them recognition by asking. And number two, you can get up and give the true words that comes out of their mouth to those around there, if anything happens to them, of what they really thought their success was in their life.
Right. So celebrate those moments, celebrate those small wins, because they do become big wins. And we don't want to ignore the big wins, but we certainly want to recognize that there's a whole lot more in the moments along the way, in the little wins that get us there. There's a whole lot more of life in the moments than there is in the big wins. Those are momentary, they're fleeting. So I think we have to hold on to the moments a little bit longer. Typically we leave folks with a challenge, and I think that's the challenge, right? You just gave that to them. What is your personal success? How can you celebrate that? Know what the people in your life believe is their personal success. And here are some tactics. This is different for us this time, but there are actually some things that we can do. And we've talked about how you can train your brain, and how I talked about this, your habits, if you can allow them to be habits, can reground you, and that can happen then without you having to work so hard at it. It can keep you from starting to slide down that slippery slope of depression and negative thoughts. We've talked a little bit about that, but there are a couple of tactics that can actually help us build our potential, grow our potential for being successful in the ways that we've talked about it today. One is to increase your mindfulness, and we have talked about that, right? If you can think it and believe it, you are more likely to be able to do it. We also know that if you write that down and you say it out loud, it increases the likelihood that it will happen. And I think I've been using a gratitude journal, and it asks me a couple questions that I think have been really life-changing. And it doesn't take more than a few minutes to think about it. But when I wake up in the morning, the first thing that it has me write down is, what would make today great? And what that question does is helps me to focus on what the win for the day is going to be. And if I can focus on that win for the day, then that will lead to the bigger win, right? And then it also, the other thing that it does is has me reflect at night. So how was the day? Did that win happen? Did that success happen? And if it did, what made it happen? What did I do intentionally to make it happen? And if it didn't, what could I do differently? The other thing that it does is ask me to write down one thing I learned. And I think that takes us right back to the beginning, and how the definition of success might be changing. And that is really about our ability to be agile in our thinking and change and learn.
Everything you said is just true. Because if you look at the back of my shirt.
Oh, let's look. Believe.
I've been writing the word believe now for like 12 years, and everything you just said is 100% true. When you were talking right there, I was like, everything she's saying is so true. Because if I wrote this word down like 10 years ago, and I read it every day.
It's your mantra.
It's my mantra.
It's your mantra.
And on the worst days, what you said, it totally works. We did it. I'm Javier.
And I'm Tammy.
And this is Shed Talk.
This podcast is brought to you by Infinite Resources, a local staffing agency connecting diverse job candidates in central Iowa companies.
Amplified.